I'd like to welcome you all back to the IE427 garage. Today we're working on wiring the Ford control pack on the Gen 3 Coyote. Alright, I dove right in when I got home from work today, and I started working on the wiring for the Ford control pack for the Gen 3 Coyote. And God, there's a lot of wiring. We're going to have a lot of excess, and I'm hoping what I can do is secure some of the excess wiring in places that won't be seen, because honestly I don't want to have to go in and start cutting the wires and making them shorter. But we'll see what happens. So as you saw on some of the previous videos, we do have the control pack in place, and it is right here. But with the heater and the wiper motor, we ended up having to relocate our Ford control pack fuse box. So it ended up right here. So we relocated it from over here to over here. We only moved it about 6 or 8 inches. Once we freed up that space, then we needed to find a space that we could put our mega fuse. Our mega fuse is going to control, or actually it's going to supply power to our Ford control pack. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm also going to tie all of our Ron Francis harness into that mega fuse as well. I may put a call into Ford Racing and find out if that's cool with them. I don't see any reason why we couldn't, but we'll see. And that would all land right here on this terminal. And what I'm going to do then is our battery power from our engine mount battery supplied from Breeze. We'll probably send that positive battery cable down the 4-inch frame rail and then up back here and then land it on this side of that mega fuse, and then from that mega fuse down we'll supply the starter. Now, if the people at Ford Racing tell me that that has to be isolated or it can't be connected to the Ron Francis harness, the chassis harness, then what we'll end up doing is we're just going to do it according to the instructions that came with the Ron Francis harness, and we're going to send all those wires from that harness down to the starter motor, and then we'll feed our power directly from the battery to the starter motor, from the starter motor up. The problem is that that starter motor stud is going to get awfully busy. It's going to have a lot of stuff landed on it, and I don't know whether or not the stud is long enough for all that stuff. So in the past we haven't done it that way because it just gets too crowded on that stud, but we'll have to see what happens. The other things that I started working on were getting all the penetrations made through the firewall for all of the stuff, including the Ron Francis harness. So right here is where we drill the hole to go through the firewall into the cockpit for the Ford control pack wiring. So anything that has to go into the car, so for the accelerator pedal, for the clutch safety switch, for the key on, and the ignition for the starter, all of that stuff is going through this grommet here. The one next to that is for the alternator and for that main battery power for the Ron Francis harness. This one has been here for a while. This one goes to the rear of the car and supplies all the power for the turn signals to the back, the taillights, the fuel pump, and all that kind of stuff. So that's in, and we're going to start getting some of that stuff tied in. Alright everybody, it's the next day. I'm moving a ladder over to this side of the car so I can get you up. It is just hotter than the surface of the sun here. And I've got the doors closed and the air on, which means I can't move cars around, and so the lift can't go all the way down with a car that has the body on it. With just a bare chassis or a roller, I can actually get, and no, the lift is not touching Jim's car, so don't worry. I can get a Mark IV between the door and the lift and raise the lift all the way up and all the way down. But since Jim's car is in front right now, I'm limited on what I can do. So I've just been hopping up on the ladder when I have to. I'm not crying about this. Having the lift is a godsend. And for those of you that don't have them and are jealous, I hear you. So I count my blessings every day. I'm continuing on wiring. I worked over the last 2 days. We had some visitors in the shop yesterday that left this morning, and so I wanted to give them as much time while they were here as I possibly could. And so it's the afternoon, and I'm just getting to start working on the 25th anniversary car again. But I'm working on wiring. I've got a lot of stuff to show you that I've done over the last couple of days here and there. I've just kind of been moving around the car doing different things, and I hit roadblocks on some things, and so I was able to switch gears and come back to the electrical. So I'll go over those roadblocks in a few minutes, but most of that still has to do with the electric on the engine. So what I got is I've got the fuse box for the Coyote control pack mounted right here. So what I did is it used to be mounted here, where I've now got the mega fuse mounted, and it just wouldn't fit underneath the heater and with the wiper motor next to it. So I ended up moving it from here to here. It's still going to fit. It's going to be fine. The cover is a little bit more difficult to get off of the fuse box now. However, we only have so much real estate under the hood. So, you know, I had to do something. So after I got that done, I went ahead and I mounted the mega fuse right here. All right, so what I did is I mounted the power for the Ford control pack fuse box, and then I ran all of the Ron Francis wiring that is going to the fuse box inside the car to the fused side of the mega fuse. And then on the other side, I've got the main power for the fuse coming up from the starter. So basically, on the starter motor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to land the main battery cable, and then this power cable that comes from there up to the fuse panel is going to get full power from that connection down at the battery. So that's done there. And then what I did as well is I extended the blue wire that is going to trigger the starter that was in the Ron Francis harness right here. So I cut off the ring terminal on the end. I extended the wire down to the starter, put a new ring terminal on, and so that is going to trigger the starter. What we're going to do is we're going to tie in the Ford control pack into the start circuit for the Ron Francis harness. Now, we're not going through the wiring that it carries through the Ron Francis harness for the clutch safety switch, because we're actually using the Ford clutch safety switch. But the power from the key that is supplied by the Ford control pack to the starter will be triggered through that blue wire. I don't know how else to explain it. We're going to do kind of the same thing with the fuel pump. Even though we're not using the Ford, or we're not using the Ron Francis harness to trigger the fuel pump, we are going to be using the power for it. And we're just going to send a trigger power from the Ford control pack to the Ron Francis harness to send power back to the fuel pump. And that keeps it simple for us anyway, so we can have an easier time diagnosing. You will have two fuel pump fuses, one at the Ford control pack and one in the car. However, they're both going to be labeled fuse, or fuel, and so if one goes, you'll know to look in both spots, or the owner will. He'll be instructed to. So I've got that done, and then let me climb off the ladder here. I'll take you around to the other side of the car. I'll show you what's going on over there. Some of the stuff we were able to finish, some of it we weren't, because, well, circumstances. We had visitors in the shop, both last night and this morning, and so this is what our visitors brought us a bunch of Factory 5 parts. Now I'm going to do my best not to show you whose parts these are, but just know we've got windshields, we've got radiators, we've got power steering pumps, we've got all kinds of stuff. Basically what we did is we've got a new build that's going to be heading this way from Texas. And that customer just described to us some of the logistical problems that he was having trying to get his whole project out here. And so what we did is we contacted one of our buddies out in Texas. Thank you, Joel. And Joel was able to bring some of this stuff out because he was planning a trip to California to pick up a bimini top that we had been storing for him. So it just worked out. He was able to make his trip out here from Texas, and he was able to bring a truck bed full of this customer's parts for us. And so now the customer in Texas will be able to trailer and truck in his pickup truck all of the rest of the parts out here so that we can start on that build. I don't know how soon that build's going to start. I've told the customer that it may be a while before we get to it, but it just worked out that this was the time frame that he had in order to get his project out here, and so we just jumped at the opportunity to get that vehicle out here. We're going to keep storing Slytherin down at the other shop for now. Sorry, guys. So, moving on, what we have on the driver's side of the car is sensors. We started working on sensors yesterday in the morning, I think. I finally knocked off here at about, I think it was around 6 o'clock when our guest showed up. And what I decided to do yesterday was a couple of those things that I usually dread, which is running the wires for the alternator and running the wires for the sensors for the gauges and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys enjoy that kind of stuff. Hey, good for you. I just hate trying to find a path on the top, especially of a Coyote engine, or underneath it, or on the side of it, or whatever, to kind of strap things, because they just don't lend themselves to keeping the wires like hidden. There's just so many wires already on these motors that when you try to dress them and keep them neat, sometimes it just seems like an impossibility. But I think we did a pretty good job. What we did for the alternator wiring, and if you're doing a Gen 3, and I think this is true for even the Gen 1 and Gen 2s, the computer, the Ford Control Pack, controls the charging of the alternator. Now, if you're using a Holley system like the Terminator X that we used on Michael's car, then what you have to do is you have to wire it to an ignition source with a 510 ohm resistor so that the ignition triggers the alternator in order to turn on and off. In this case, since the Ford Control Pack is going to control it, there is a brown wire in the harness for the Ron Francis chassis harness that we ended up clipping the end of, bending the end of the wire over, and putting heat shrink over the end so that it would not, if ever became energized, short out against anything. So it's still inside the harness, but it's safed off so it can't ever be grounded out against anything. And then we ran the main alternator power wire, which goes over to, that's going to be, I may have to move that. I may have to move that over. I may move that to the hot side of the Mega Fuse. It's not a big deal to do that, so I think I may do that. Just so that it's not part of the fuse circuit, because these things can go, they can charge up to, I think, 140 amps, some of them. I don't know what the Ford one here is rated at, but that's only a 250 amp Mega Fuse, and so I just prefer to probably run the alternator unfused. Regardless, so we've got that done. Then what I worked on was some of the sensors. So if you look in here, and you can't really see it because I've got all the wires kind of in the way, but I've got the water temperature sensor for let's see if I can get in there and get this out of the way. I've got the water temperature sensor for the speed hut gauges in right there. So that takes a 3/4 to a 1/2 inch NPT reducer, and then that takes it down to, I think it is 3/8. No, it's 1/8 MIP. So it's the fine thread, and then our sensor goes in there. Now over here, I've got the oil pressure sensor loose, but I haven't pulled it out because this was a early Gen 3 Coyote. And I'm sorry if you guys couldn't see all that in there. I couldn't get the flashlight in there and hold that and then point my finger at what I was pointing at. So the problem with having an early Gen 3 Coyote is Factory 5 and a lot of the people that were selling crate engines from Ford at that time weren't up on all of the criteria that Ford had kind of implemented into the Gen 3 that was different than the Gen 2. So for instance, on the Gen 1, Gen 2 Coyotes, you could run the engine without the oil pressure sensor and the computer didn't care. The sensor was just there for the computer to register whether or not the oil pressure was reading to send to a gauge. In this sense, in this case, the Gen 3 needs to see that signal, otherwise it shuts the engine down at a certain RPM. I don't know if it's 2,000 or 3,000 RPM. So they have to be run in tandem. You have to have the factory oil pressure sensor, and you have to have a sensor, in this case, for your gauges. And those are all metric threads. So I went through our inventory list and looked for those parts because they are listed in the latest update of the Gen 3 installation literature on factory5parts.com. And we don't have them. Those parts didn't ship with our kit. This kit was ordered for a Gen 2 Coyote, and supplies were short on the Gen 2, and so this car went out with a Gen 3. And so I think that was sent out before this latest instruction update was implemented. So we have a problem. We don't have the adapters. Now, there are places online that sell an adapter just for this, varying in price from about $35 to $100. But I don't know. You know, again, these aren't my cars, and so I put all of the information that I have out to the customers, and then I leave it up to them what they want to do as far as whether they want to spend the money for a pretty part or whether they want to go with the parts that were supplied by Factory 5 and use as many of those parts that were included or not. I've got an email into Dan Galoob over at Factory 5. But Factory 5 is shut down this coming week for some upgrades, I'm assuming, to either their building or their infrastructure, and so therefore they are not accepting emails, and I don't know if they're going to be accepting phone calls. So I'm going to patiently wait until they respond to my email, but I will probably do a follow-up call to Dan and see if he'll take my phone call and see if we can't get those parts shipped out. I'm assuming they'll ship them for free and provide them, since this was just an oversight, not on their part, but it was just an oversight. It was an accident, and hopefully they'll send us out those parts. If not, $45, I know I can get the adapter, we can plug it in. It's a much cleaner solution than what Factory 5 has given us. If you guys go through the assembly manual for the Gen 3 Coyote, you'll see it's a series of adapters and T-fittings and stuff. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but hey, if it works, it's hidden down low enough in the car, nobody's going to see it. But again, I'll leave that up to the owner. I'm kind of rambling on here, but I want to be clear on the stuff that I described to you. So if you're doing a Gen 3 Coyote and your build is kind of languished and you find that you don't have these parts, just place a call to Factory 5, let them know that you're missing them, and hopefully, they'll just send them and you'll be good. So that's about it on where we're at with the wiring of the Coyote. We're going to continue wiring on this thing. It just seems as though these Coyote builds and the mod motor builds take forever to wire because there's just so much stuff, and we've got a lot of stuff behind the dash too. So I'm guessing we're going to be wiring for a few weeks. So guys are gonna just have to get used to it. However, the video is running long, and I think I'm going to end it here. We'll carry on with this stuff probably on one of the coming videos. And again, I'll show you where I'm at and, you know, what we're doing on different things to solve some of the problems that we're running into just because of all the space constraints that we're being dealt. So, yeah. All right, that's going to do it for today. I did get a nice little message on I think it was YouTube this morning, saying that someone likes my style of the videos about showing how I did it. And you know what? Everybody has different ways of doing their videos. This is just the way it seems to work for me. I'm doing these videos basically as updates for the customers, because you can see I've got car builds going from Washington to Texas and all points in between. So it just makes sense this way because the customers are able to see what's going on with their cars. So if you're enjoying the content, please do the comment, do the like, the share, the subscribe, and all that stuff too. And thank you for watching. We appreciate all the views, and we'll see you guys all next time. Have a great day.